Good afternoon, and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. I am going to change the intro to that very, very soon here. As soon as we make our move to the new studios, we're going to do some cleaning up of all that stuff. And so Mr. AI, chatbot, will not be giving me any more intros. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We'll take care of that in the near future. This, of course, is your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, back for another opportunity to talk about the two things we're not supposed to talk about in public: religion and politics. And yes, they do indeed mix. Thanks for listening in today to AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. If you're chilly, you can finally say thank God that it's finally winter, because it has been a relatively moderate winter in terms of cold temperatures. But we have gotten a plethora of rain. We're supposed to get a little bit more tomorrow. I was kind of looking forward to snow last night. They kept saying that the snow level is going to drop to 3,000 feet, which would be about the elevation of where my house is located. Unfortunately, we got no snow last night. My buddies up in Tehachapi and over in Kernville and in other areas that would be commensurate to my elevation of where I live, they all got snow. But I was totally cheated. So maybe tonight the town of Acton might get a little dusting of snow. We'll see. We've gotten snow every year we've lived in our home, which is 2016. We've gotten snow every year, and some years we've gotten multiple rounds. But it would be great to be able to get a little snow this winter. Today is going to be a different show. I'm going to focus on some things that I would not normally focus on during the first part of the show. However, around 2:45-ish or so, gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton will be calling in and giving us an update on his campaign. Also, I'm sure talking about some of the latest polls that some of you have probably seen that were dropped this morning, with Steve Hilton leading the pack, with Eric Swalwell in second, Chad Bianco at third, and everybody else trailing in the pack there. So I'm sure Steve is excited. Also, for those of you that are following this gubernatorial campaign, especially on the Republican side, there was a head-to-head matchup about a week ago, and it showed Steve Hilton ahead of Chad Bianco by about 11 or 12 points. But again, to be fair, if your campaign is putting out a poll, you're going to make sure that your candidate is ahead. So I wasn't terribly certain if that was a Steve Hilton poll or not, but we'll ask Steve when he calls a look around and listen to that. Before I get into what I really want to talk about for the rest of this first half hour, I want to talk a little bit about the technique the Democrats are going to employ coming into the midterms and maybe even 2028, if this particular technique is successful. The Democrats, they are a chameleon party. In other words, they are going to imitate and try to be something that they are in reality not. And there are a few guys running, and there are also current incumbents in office right now who are trying to polish their Christian bona fides. In other words, giving the impression that they are Christian and that they are also Democrat. Now, you've probably heard me say this. It's very hard for you to be a Bible believer and also support all of the policies and the platform of the Democratic Party. It's just very, very hard. If you're a Christian, then you're going to be pro-life. You're not going to be pro-abortion at all. You're probably not going to be for multiplicity of genders like the Democratic Party is, and so on and so forth. So there's too much there that you would have to disagree with if you're a Christian. However, the Democrats realize that in order to flip red districts in red states, they're going to have to kind of come in with a chameleon campaign to give the impression to some of those red state voters that, hey, it's safe to vote for me, even though there's a D in front of my name. And one of those guys that is running in Texas in order to flip a red seat right now that is currently held by John Cornyn, who, by the way, most Republicans do not like, but, I would take John Cornyn over James Tallarico, who is the American politician who is currently running in the primary in order to primary John Cornyn and unseat John Cornyn and turn a otherwise red seat into a blue flip. And James Tallarico is a young guy. He was born in 1989, so he's, somewhere around 30-something. Not very old. He's a Presbyterian seminarian, but he's not a conservative Presbyterian. He would be more of a progressive seminarian. And he's also a former public school teacher. So here's what James Tallarico said while he was on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple weeks ago.
But I say all this in context of abortion because before God comes over Mary and we have the incarnation, God asks for Mary's consent, which is remarkable. I mean, go back and read this in Luke.
Well, James, I am going to go back and read that in Luke. So for those of you who just tuned in or maybe didn't hear all of that, James Tallarico was on Joe Rogan's podcast and said to Joe Rogan that God Almighty, the creator of the universe, asked Mary's permission to have Jesus. Yes, exactly. And then he actually had the audacity to say, go look at the text. So I've got the text right here in my hand. And the Bible says in Luke chapter 1, verse 30, and the angel said unto her, fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. Verse 31 is the text in question. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. Is there any place here in this verse where God is asking Mary for permission? All I see is it says, thou shalt conceive in thy womb. So the tactic that the Democrats are going to use in 2026, and if they're successful, this is going to be the tactic they use in 2028, is they're going to be Democrats, but they're going to be safe Democrats because they're Christian Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be a Christian and a Democrat. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is this is the ruse they are going to play, and if you're in a red state and you're in a red district and you get played by this stuff, that, my friend, is completely on you. That would be foolish. So be warned out there, guys like James Tallarico in Texas are trying to hornswoggle the Republican right out there. And if you get hornswoggled by him, then it's your fault. All right. I want to talk about something completely that is out of character for the show a little bit. Now, many of you know me personally. Some of you that listen know that I like to hunt and I like to fish and I like the outdoors. Because I'm a conservative, that doesn't mean that I want dirty water and I want all animals to be killed and I don't want any animals and any fish in the ocean or any fish in the lakes or any fish in the rivers. That is the exact opposite of what a conservative conservationist like myself would want. But there is a group, and there will be more groups like this across the nation, that are trying to get an initiative passed in the state of Oregon. Now, if you're wondering why I'm talking about the state of Oregon, even though we are a Southern California-based radio show, the reason why I'm talking about Oregon is because Oregon is just the blue state north of us. We share a border. And the people in Oregon, especially on the western part of Oregon, are just as nuts as many of the folks that live in the cities here in California. And if this initiative passes in Oregon, it's called Yes on IP, which stands for Initiative Petition, Initiative Petition, Yes on IP 28, all right? And it's actually called the PEACE Act. PEACE is an acronym for People for the Elimination of Animal Cruelty Exemptions. Now, if you just read that, anybody who's, walking out of the grocery store and there's a little table there that says, sign the petition to eliminate animal cruelty. Well, if that's all you're reading, then you're going to sign that, right? Who's for animal cruelty? I'm not for animal cruelty. But here are the details of this PEACE Act. It would outlaw completely in the state of Oregon hunting, fishing, trapping, and other industries like farming, ranching, scientific research, and even for people in homes and businesses to trap and or kill rats and or mice. In other words, you can't even, should this law pass in Oregon, get on the ballot and it passes in November, you can't even kill a mouse in your home. You can't kill chickens. You can't raise cattle for the purpose of slaughtering. You can't do that. Now, some of you are out there thinking, well, I'm vegetarian and I'm totally for this. Well, you're probably also going to say to me as a Christian, hey, you can believe what you want to believe, just don't force that on me. What is this but forcing an entire population of a state to digest, no pun intended, your silly, atrocious approach to the millions in Oregon that hunt, who fish, who ranch, and who enjoy a hamburger? So, for those of you in Oregon, which there's so many of you listening from Oregon, this right here needs to be killed, and it needs to be killed with an overwhelming vote. And that's gonna happen this November, should they get the 117,000 signatures that they need, that are required to get this on the ballot. They've got a little over 100,000 at the moment. They're probably going to need well over 120 because they have to allot for the fact that some of those are going to be double ups and, improper signatures and all that kind of stuff that happens. But this is an extreme lefty vegan rights agenda kind of a thing. Again, you're a vegan, amen, more power to you. I have nothing against you. What I'm complaining about is force feeding, again, forgive the pun, force feeding an entire agenda down the entire state of Oregon. If it does pass, I don't think it will, but if it does pass, California is next. Now, here is the absolute irony of this, and I will ask my board op, Jen, to come on here for a brief minute, because Jen, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to Catalina Island?
No, I have not. My children have, oddly
Okay.
enough, for a school trip.
Did you know that Catalina Island has a deer population?
I did not know that.
So-
How does that happen?
Okay. It's because a male and a female deer got on the island and they did what they did. That's how that happened.
An Adam and Eve moment.
Yeah, they had an Adam and Eve moment. So in the 1920s, a few deer were brought from the mainland over to Catalina, and then over the course of that 100 years, they all breeded, of course. And there's about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 deer on this island. So there's also what is called the Catalina Conservation Society. And the Catalina Conservation Society, for the last several years, has been trying to get the government to approve some sort of legislation to allow the Conservation Society to slaughter all the deers on the island because they're, quote, invasive and they were brought onto the island, so they're non-native species. Because they believe that the deer are eating particular brush that are not allowing fires to be put out quick enough on the island. I'm going to just read something to you. There is a nonprofit behind the plan. You're probably thinking in Radio Land, what does this have to do with that Oregon thing? Just give me a minute. The nonprofit behind the plan saying get rid of the deer is needed to restore and preserve the island's ecosystem, including rare plants. And they have approved a plan. This was earlier this year, to eradicate Catalina's entire deer population as part of a broader effort to restore the island ecosystem, which of course has sparked fierce opposition, which I'm glad it has. Which, this is bipartisan. Janice Hahn, who is a sitting supervisor, Democrat, she's on my side on this. I don't want to see all these animals killed.
Yeah.
And why not why not allow more hunting to thin out that herd? And here's what they want to do. They want to bring in sharpshooters and just kill the animals and leave them lay. Not even harvest them and maybe donate them to homeless shelter or whatever for venison. You know,
Right.
if you're homeless, you haven't had a good meal, who cares?
You'll take deer
You'll
meat.
take deer meat.
Sure.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. But they just want to leave the animals lay. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're I know you're more of an independent-minded individual politically, but these guys in Oregon, these are committed lefties. I mean, these guys are just...
It's in their blood.
I saw the guy that's spearheading it being interviewed yesterday on an Oregon channel, and everything I envisioned in my mind how he would look like came to pass. I'm like, that guy needs some meat. He needs to have a good hamburger.
Sure.
He just looks gaunt and pale and vampire-esque. But anyway, so these people in Oregon who want to completely outlaw hunting, trapping, fishing, animal husbandry, you name it, the same people that want to save these animals in California want to kill all the deer in Catalina.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
So,
That makes no sense.
I am just trying to figure out what is going on in the mind of these individuals, and they're all committed to this staunch environmental thing. As a conservationist, every time I buy a hunting license, every time I buy a fishing license, every time I buy a certain goods, a portion of that goes to conservation. And I mean, do you think a guy like me, and of course I'm saying this redundantly, but of course you can answer, Jen, you think a guy like me wants to be able to, 10 years from now, take my grandkids to a lake and there's no fish in it, take my grandkids to a river and there's no fish in it, or take my grandkids to the woods and see no deer, no elk, no nothing?
And wipe
That is
everything
the
out.
silliest, stupid thing ever.
Well, and I wonder also why the answer, and I'm uneducated on this, but why would the solution be to leave the carcass of the deer over in Catalina? Is there not a better system? So fine, you want to eradicate all of the deer population.
And they already eradicated pigs, which were also invasive.
So you're just going to kill them and leave them there?
So
There's no other solution?
So in this particular thing, a conservationist person from the island said, well, if the deer were killed closer to like Avalon, which is the main area there of Catalina, then we might take that deer and then donate it to some homeless shelter. But out in the inland portions of the island, where there's nothing other than just the island itself, they're just going to leave the carcass lay. Again, to me, ultimate in waste, and that is exactly what a hunter would not do.
Sure, right.
Yeah, that's exactly
Right.
Like for instance, me, if I were to injure an animal, I would track that animal for as far as I could track it to find it and retrieve it, and if it was still alive, then put it out of its misery and then harvest it.
proper way,
The
yeah,
proper way.
not just leave it
I
there.
would never leave it there.
Right.
And every time a hunter like myself walks in the woods and sees an animal that has an arrow in it or has been killed by a hunter and it wasn't retrieved, it's just laying there, hunters like myself are irate by that.
Yeah.
Because those guys give us guys
Correct.
a bad rap.
It has to be handled properly.
It has to be
Yeah.
handled properly. So folks, think about this stupid initiative, the Peace Act, which of course is erroneously referred to or called the Peace Act. If this passes in Oregon, it is going to find its way in California. And for those of you here in California, go to the supervisors' offices, go to the supervisors' meetings, and stand up for the California mule deer on Catalina Island. They'll thank you for it. When we return here, we'll talk a little bit more on Politics and the Pulpit. All right, we're back here on Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station. We just got done talking about this Peace Act up in Oregon, where they want to outlaw all hunting, fishing, trapping, animal husbandry. For those of you in the city here, that just means farming, raising animals for the purpose of slaughter, cattle, chickens, things of that nature. I'm just wondering if the group that is behind this initiative, which are a bunch of very, I would say, religious bigots in the progressive leftist sense. I wonder if they've thought of the fiscal repercussions of the decision long term of doing this. In other words, what would happen if there was no culling of the animal herd of any kind? If there was no fishing, and fish weren't taken out of lakes and rivers, what would happen? In other words, would the long-term trend be far worse than the actual notion of hunting and fishing? The other thing that this bill would outlaw is using animals for scientific purposes. In other words, testing on animals. Now, listen, I'm not for testing on animals just for the sake of testing on animals. But listen, I guess I'd much rather test on an animal than I would a human. And I'd want to find out if something was working before I took it, right? So maybe they could, start small and take a smaller chunk out of the pie by maybe, having an initiative about, animals that are being used in testing cases for science. Maybe they could do that, but no, they want to take the whole pie here. And this, in my opinion, folks, is just a religious fanaticism that is to the nth degree. These folks think that someone like me is a threat. Honestly, I know this because I've got the emails. I see the comments online. A pastor should not have a radio show. Really, I did not realize. I didn't know that the First Amendment didn't apply to me. But the fact of the matter is, I just find it odd that the same people who are saying that I should not force down the collective throats of the masses my position on things are themselves forcing their position on all of us. I mean, statewide in Oregon. I mean, can you imagine if Oregon becomes the first state? And you can understand why it starts in blue states, right? Because obviously red states are not going to be for this. But I think this is important for people to understand that Democrats also hunt and Democrats also fish, because Pennsylvania, which is a blue state, a purple state, I guess. Trump won it twice, but purple state. Do you know that there are more hunters in the state of Pennsylvania per capita than there are anywhere else in the United States of America? I mean, there are just a lot of hunters in Pennsylvania. And I promise you, not all of them are Republicans. And I promise you that not all of them are right-leaning independents. They're Democrats. One of the, there have been many Democrats that like to hunt, to fish, to shoot skeet, and all this kind of stuff. I heard also that in Scotland, they're trying to impose a tax, a very high tax, on folks that shoot, skeet, and have hunting ranches in Scotland. Now, in Scotland, they just don't have public land like we do here, where you can just go out and shoot a deer. There's some great benefits to living in the United States of America, but in Scotland, everything is overseen by an overarching government, and even there, you have some of these groups. And some of these groups have taken a foothold in the governments there, because the governments in like Scotland and other places tend to be more left than us. And I know that's hard for us to believe here in California, that anybody could be more left than us, but it is a fact. But yeah, this is going to steamroll. When they were interviewing that gaunt-looking guy on that Oregon show yesterday that I was watching on YouTube, the reporter pushed back slightly and said, "Yeah, you don't think this is going to pass, right?" And he actually conceded. He said, it's very possible that this is not going to pass the first time. But then went on to say, we have taken a look at how many times something needs to be on the ballot in order to pass, and he used women's suffrage as an example, and how it took many years to finally get women's suffrage passed, and then, of course, in the Constitution with the 19th Amendment. Now, if they're thinking, long term, 10, 20 years down the road, they're going to be able to do this, then that's great. But I just do not think they do not realize, or maybe they don't care what the repercussions are going to be if things like animal life are not properly maintained through regulative hunting practices and regulated fishing. There's a reason why when you go to the lakes or when you go to the rivers, it says, 5 trout, 2 bass, 3 catfish or something like that, right? And what's the point of that? It's so that you're not taking all the fish out. It's just normal to me. And then, of course, we raise fish in order to restock these things, right? For those of us that live here in Santa Clarita, we can just go down the 126, and just before you get into Fillmore, on the left, there is a trout hatchery, the Fillmore Trout Hatchery. If you've never been there, it's free, folks. You just go down the 126 like you're west towards Fillmore, and just before you get into Fillmore proper, it's on your left-hand side, and you can go in there and see how they raise the trout. You can go feed them. They got like a little thing you can dip a cup in and throw it in the water and watch all the trout come up and eat the little round things that you throw in the water. I mean, we raise them for the sake of fishing, so we can harvest them, eat them, and we do this every year. But yet, the joyless individuals in Oregon and even in our state want their religious ideology imposed on all of us. And I am imploring folks out there, don't let this happen. How many have heard, just to kind of go back to California politics here just for a brief moment, how many of you heard that the high-speed rail CEO was arrested on suspicion of domestic violence? Have you heard about that? Yeah, he was arrested because he was guilty of domestic violence. And this is the same guy that is overseeing the high-speed bullet train that is literally going nowhere here in the state of California. And did you also hear that they are trying to pass something within the state Senate to where we can't find out certain things about the high-speed rail that all of us are starting to figure out after almost 20 years of construction? How come this is taking so stinking long? Where is the money going? Why are there only certain buildings up? Why isn't there rails from Southern California to Central California? Why don't we have all that stuff? How is it that if we look in our distant past, and we can look at something as beautiful as the Golden Gate Bridge, can you imagine trying, with our current political climate under the Democrats right now in California, with all the regulations and red tape that people have to jump through to do anything in California? I wonder how long it would take in the 21st century right now to build the Golden Gate Bridge. I bet it would take years and years to build the Golden Gate Bridge. It didn't take nearly as long over 100 years ago. You know why? Less problems, less red tape, less regulation. And frankly, Democrats that weren't stupid, which we have a lot of them today, that are just not. They have taken their Democratic Party and they have made that their church. That is their entire reason for living. They have made that their church. The state has become their government. Think about, or the state has become their God, I should say. Think about the Empire State Building. How long do you think that would have taken if we were to construct it today? It would take years. I mean, can you imagine just trying to figure out the ground through the ecology people that try to figure out whether or not the dirt is, conducive for a particular bug? I mean, this is one of the silly things about this these Catalina deer slaughter conservationists out there, they're saying that there is a particular bush on Catalina Island that supposedly is flame retardant in the sense that it slows down the progression of a fire. And because that plant is being targeted by the deer, that is, they're eating it, that it's causing fires to move more rapidly across the island when a fire burns. Yeah, a deer eats the plant, and that it's the deer's fault that the fire is burning quicker and hotter because the plant that the deer is eating is supposedly not slowing down the progression of the fire. Now, folks, strange stuff, man. Strange stuff. And I just find it odd that so many people buy into this stuff. The same people that think we're going to have a bullet train in California in my lifetime, maybe your lifetime, I doubt it, but the same people that believe in the bullet train are the same people that, on the one hand, believe in not killing any animals, but on the other hand, will believe in killing all kinds of animals. These are also the same people who are trying to save cows from slaughter, who are complete advocates for abortion no matter what the trimester. They don't care. They don't care if it's first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, or even partial birth abortion. You know what Romans 1 says about people like that? Romans 1, the Apostle Paul is writing, and he's talking about people who have rejected truth and rejected God. He says that God turns them over to a reprobate mind, and they do things that are not convenient. And then it goes on to say the ultimate outworking of that is they worship the creature instead of the Creator. So they worship the land. They worship the animals, but they don't worship the one who gave you the land, who created the land, who gave you the animals. That's the ultimate result of rejecting truth. And folks, as a Christian conservative conservationist, I am all for protecting animals, not over against humans, but protecting animals, protecting wildlife, and the forage that they eat. I'm all for that, but not at the expense of a baby in the womb or a human being that's, walking down the street. But I will do my absolute utmost to make sure that there's a sane approach to things like the deer population on Catalina Island, or trying to outlaw all farming, or the killing of rats and mice in your own home. I mean, come on, folks. When we return here on Politics in the Pulpit, we're going to hear from gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton. He's going to give us an update on his campaign, and we'll talk a little bit about the polls and where he's been showing up here lately, which has been number 1 or number 2. So we'll ask Steve here in just a few moments here on your hometown station. All right, this is Pastor Jerry Cook on your hometown station, Politics in the Pulpit. We're still waiting for gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton to call in here. He's probably on the campaign trail, busy, and we'll ask him a little bit about the campaign here in just a second. However, I wanted to highlight some of these polls that came out this morning. One of the things I like to do first thing in the morning is to just kind of do a quick scroll before I get into my Bible reading. I gotta get into this. Oh, here he's calling right now, Jen. So we're gonna go ahead and pick up the phone here for Steve Hilton and ask Steve a little bit about his campaign. Oh, Jennifer! Here he comes. So one of the polls suggests here that that Steve is in the first place. And Steve Hilton, are you there? Uh-oh.
Did he hang up on
Oh, he hung up on you. You left right at the same time that he called in.
I went in to see if he was going to call.
Well, it happens, you know.
Right.
Well,
We'll
maybe.
have him call back.
Well, maybe. Hopefully, Chad Bianco will call in, but no, we won't do that.
That's not nice.
I'll go ahead and text him here and say, "Call in again,
Have him
Steve."
call back,
And
We just crisscrossed each
yeah,
other.
yeah. He said calling, but no answer. So we're gonna go ahead and give him a second here to call back in, and hopefully he'll do that. Uh-oh. Is he going to call in? I think he's going to call in.
Okay.
I just texted him. There he is. All right. Live radio,
Well, I was
folks.
just going to say, welcome to live radio.
All right. Steve Hilton, how are you, sir?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Well, listen, I was scrolling this morning, saw the polls with you at number 1, and Eric Swalwell, which is a name I don't like to mention very often, is in the number 2 spot. And in the last few weeks, I've seen you and Chad Bianco either in 1 or 2 or 1 or 3. How are you feeling about the election this November?
I'm feeling good. It's good to be leading. We've been leading in a lot of the polls, the real polls, and I feel like so far so good. But we have to work much harder even than this, because there's a very real risk. Even though you're right that you see 2 Republicans either in the top 2 or very close to the top 2, I think that could change if we're not careful, because you've got a new entrant into the race, Matt Mahan. Most people haven't heard of him. He's the mayor of San Jose, but he's got a ton of tech money behind him, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so you can expect to be pushed up the polls very rapidly by all that big tech money. And then on the other one is probably going to be Swalwell, but it still could be Katie Porter. The big unions are going to pick their puppet. They always do. There's always a candidate for the unions. And so that will mean whoever that candidate is has a ton of money. I think it's going to be Swalwell. What we're looking at, therefore, is 2 very well-funded Democrats. And before too long, you could just as easily see 2 Democrats in the top 2, which would be a complete disaster. For our state, it would kill the chances of change in November. It would crush our hopes in all the other races, the very important races for House seats, for voter ID, for state legislature. All the races going on in California will be threatened by that. And so it's a very serious moment for Republicans. And so while I'm encouraged by this poll, we've got to focus on the fact that we need to get behind one candidate. We need to have a strong Republican champion. This poll shows that I'm in the lead. I've got the business experience, the government reform experience, the positive policy platform, which is really resonating with Californians. So I think that we've got to really get serious about this, get behind one candidate, and take the fight to the Democrats and win in November.
A couple of weeks ago, I saw you, Steve, at an event here in Santa Clarita with our friend Jennifer Horn, who was only there briefly, unfortunately. She had to go do something else. But I noticed that you had your entire golden ticket with you, as you're calling them. And that, of course, is Steve Hilton, Gloria Romero, the former Democrat who now is Republican, Michael Gates, who's running for Attorney General, and Herb Morgan. So tell us a little bit about that golden ticket and the uniqueness of running, if you will, like a presidential candidate, but within the state of California.
Exactly. It's never been done before, but I think that we need to do things differently. We need to shake things up. It's an uphill battle. Everyone knows that. The Democrat machine is very powerful. They've got a lot of money. They've had one-party rule now for 16 years. They got used to it, and they're not going to give up power easily. We've got to fight hard and in fresh and interesting ways. And the other part of the reason for doing this is that it's just reality. Everyone knows who works in the real world, as I have, and started businesses and run companies and all over back in England and here in California. You never do anything on your own. It's a team. You've got to have a team with you. A really good, strong team is what makes things work. And that's what I'm building to turn around California. And you've got really stellar people there. And we are working together already. Just a few weeks ago, we announced CalDOGE, the California Department of Government Efficiency. We are already identifying examples of fraud in California. Just last week, we published our first fraud report, $270 million stolen from the cannabis tax fund that should have gone for substance abuse prevention, actually being siphoned off into Democrat political activity. We've got another one next week, and so on. We're doing the work already. We will be prepared on day one with a strong team and a very clear set of operating principles and policies to put into action literally on day one. And that's how we're going to make things change very quickly for Californians. And it will take a team to do it. And honestly, it's such a joy to have them with. We're doing town halls together up and down the state. Michael Gates and Gloria Romero and I were just in Canoga Park the other week, Friday night, I think it was. Michael Gates came to the one in Bakersfield 2 nights before that. We're doing this as a team because it will take a team to turn around California.
And are you thinking about expanding this team, or are you going to start with the this aggressive 4 that you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. We hope that's the case. We're talking to some of the other candidates running, and in fact, it's beyond the actual statewide elected officials, because actually a really important part, probably the most significant way that I'll be able to make change happen as governor is through appointments in the executive branch, all the endless bureaucracies and agencies that are currently making life a misery for every family and every small business in California. We're going to kick out the far-left extremists and the climate fanatics and all these woke lunatics from government. We're going to put in common sense people where possible. This is another part of the work that Cal Doge is doing. We're going to cut back or shut down these bureaucratic agencies, but where there's ones that we want to keep and change their direction, I'm going to be putting in really strong people, and you'll be seeing appointments, or I should say nominations, the people I will be nominating for those positions, that they also will be part of the team. So there's lots more to come on this. We really are doing this differently. It's a completely different approach, a very serious plan to save our beautiful state from the clutches of these far-left lunatics who've ruined California. But it's going to be, I know we can turn it around. I really do. It's just common sense. It's just getting rid of all this ridiculous extremism and the bloat and the fraud and the corruption. Just common sense principles, a little bit like you're seeing at the federal level with President Trump. We're going to be doing that in California.
I think it's important for me to just tell our listeners that the ballots drop in May, the first week in May, and then the primary is the first Tuesday in June. So in reality, we got to get those ballots in as quickly as possible.
Exactly.
And let me just give you the last word on this, Steve. If folks want to support you, if they want to help you out financially, where do they find you on web?
Well, thank you very much. That's really important because, as I mentioned earlier, we've got some very well-funded Democrats out there. Their machine is totally corrupt, and the government unions, we know all that, but we can fight back with the grassroots army. That's what we're building. So SteveHiltonForGovernor.com, F-O-R, SteveHiltonForGovernor.com. You can get involved as a volunteer. We've got lots for you to do, and of course, any kind of financial contribution is always really welcome.
Absolutely, Steve. And I'll see you here in Santa Cruz in a few weeks when you're headlining the Lincoln Club here.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that.
You have a great day, sir. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
There is gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton, and just want to appreciate very much his update on the campaign there. And, of course, we've got 2 great choices going into the May primary. And so, folks, I would encourage you to get those ballots once you get them and turn them in as quickly as possible. We'll catch you next week, same bad time, same bad channel here on your hometown station. Thanks for tuning in to Politics and the Pulpit.